What's going on, everybody? Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well on this Wednesday. We are 1 day away from the schedule release. Should be getting that tomorrow in the late afternoon or early evening. And obviously, we're all very excited for that. We did learn yesterday that we're not going to be playing the Chiefs week 1 because they already put them down for a game against the Broncos. So it's not the Chiefs. We know that. That's the only thing we do know as of me recording this video, though, that we didn't know before. So it's down to 4 teams, and really it feels like we're down to 2 teams, but I've talked about that enough. This video is sponsored by Prize Picks, and today, what I want to talk about, since we got a little bit of time between now and the schedule coming out tomorrow, I want to talk about players on this team that we can reasonably expect will get better in 2026 compared to what we got out of them in 2025. Because right now, when people talk about the Seahawks, and I'm mostly talking about people externally, like not Seahawks fans, I'm talking about fans of other teams, but also a little bit with Seahawks fans as well. There's a focus on what the team lost and whether the replacements for what they lost are adequate. And that's obviously a very fair conversation to have. But I think there's another element going on here that people are kind of missing. When you're talking about a football team going from one year to another year, there are many different things at play, and players that you lose in free agency is one of those things. And we did lose 5 players. Really, we lost 4, and then the 5th one was kind of a very minor player, but 4.5, whatever, however you want to qualify it. And we did X, Y, and Z to replace those guys. Will we be better? Will we be worse in those areas? It's not entirely clear. I think it's actually pretty close. We also have some players that are a little bit older, right? A little bit getting up there and probably won't be able to maintain the level of play that they had in 2025 because age is catching up to them. But I want to explore the opposite of that. I want to talk about players on this team that we can expect to get radically or at least noticeably better play out of in 2026 compared to 2025. Because that's getting ignored here. They're talking about, oh, Jadarian Price versus Ken Walker. They're talking about Bud Clark versus Kobe Bryant. They're talking about things like that. But what about the part where we have players on this team that were very young last year or not extensively utilized that should be bigger parts of this team for the 2026 season? Who are we getting more out of? Who are we getting better play out of in 2026 just because of that? And to me, it actually starts in a very important place with Sam Darnold. Now, Sam Darnold was good last year, obviously. We would not win the Super Bowl without a good quarterback. That's not how this works. But at the same time, Sam Darnold led the league in turnovers during the regular season, and he did that despite having a pretty low number of passing attempts and dropbacks because of our run first offense. So I look at that and I consider the fact that this is going to be his second year in Seattle, second year with these teammates, second year with JSN, Cooper Kupp, Rashid Shaheed, AJ Barner, this offensive line. I know we changed coordinators, and I know that we technically are changing the offense a little bit, but not radically. And I ask myself, can he be better than he was in 2025? And I think the answer is pretty clearly yes. If you like sports, then the best way to make them even better and more exciting is using the Prize Picks app, where it always feels good to be right. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players and build lineups with a few taps. Whatever sport you're into, and obviously we are now firmly into the NFL offseason, so we're all about baseball. We got some basketball, we got some hockey, whatever it is you like. Prize Picks gives you a fun way to stay locked in while you're watching. Definitely make sure to use the promo code HMA. Prize Picks is hooking up users with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. If you use that promo code, that is HMA. I've had a great time on Prize Picks so far, so definitely get on over to it, check it out, and make sure to get your lineups. And don't forget about Team Picks, where you can pick winners, spreads, and totals on any major game. So download the app now, use HMA, and get on over to Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And remember, always gamble responsibly. The thing to keep in mind with Sam Darnold is that while he was good last year, like I said, you had all the turnovers, and his QB rating, and I know QB rating isn't everyone's favorite stat, it's a little bit dubious. He was actually 11th in the league in QB rating, 99.1. So he was actually closer to average than the top. And I know some of the quarterbacks ahead of him didn't play every game, but they all played at least 8 games, right? Nobody here is like somebody that only played 2 games or anything like that. So I think there's room for Darnold to get better. I do. And look, I'm a big fan of the philosophy that turnovers don't matter as much as people think they do. I don't think that turnovers are the end of the world the way some people do. But if Sam Darnold can maintain his same level of play from 2025 and just get rid of some of the turnovers, that would be better. So he can do it. And that's the most important position on the field, so that's a big one. I don't really think anything at running back is gonna get better. Maybe Halani, but I don't think Halani's gonna play enough to really make a big impact there. Wide receiver, though, and this one's pretty compelling. Yes, this will probably come at the expense of Cooper Kupp, who is probably kind of one of the players that you would assume slips in 2026. Rashid Shaheed, lest we forget, was basically a non-factor as a receiver for the Seahawks post-trade. He played 9 games and caught 15 passes, not even 200 yards, no touchdowns, and then in the playoffs, he had the one big catch against the Rams. But other than that, he basically had no real impact as a receiver either. His impact was as a return man, and that's not what Rashid Shaheed is. Shaheed has been a very successful receiver in this league. In New Orleans last year before the trade, he had about 500 yards in 9 games. Then he came here and didn't even have 200 in 9 games. He had over 700 yards in 2023. He was on pace to have a 1,000-yard season in 2024 before he got hurt. And everybody else on the team got hurt too, by the way, so he wouldn't have done it probably even if he stayed healthy. But this is a good receiver who just didn't do a lot after the trade into Seattle last year. So realistically, when you're talking about Shaheed, there is every reason to expect that he will be a much better wide receiver for Seattle in 2026 than he was in 2025. So I think Shaheed's another big part of this. So if Shaheed can take steps in the right direction, you've got something. And then, of course, you have Torrey Horton, who only played about half the season last year and was a rookie. And I'm not saying he had a massive impact last year, but it was noticeable. And if he can actually get on the field this year, which may happen, I mean, maybe Cooper Kupp becomes more of a part-time player this year. We'll see. Horton has the opportunity to be a better player and make a non-trivial impact on the team improving. So I think that definitely should, for lack of a better word, cancel out any drop off on the part of Cooper Kupp. Even if there's a little bit of a drop off with JSN just because he was so good last year, I think that Shaheed and Horton are kind of cleaning that up a little bit for you. So overall, the receiver room should be better than it was last year, I think. I imagine so anyway. Tight end, maybe Elijah Arroyo. The question is, how much is he going to play? Is it going to be enough to make an impact? I don't know. He'll probably be better just because he was a rookie last year, but at the same time, it's like there's only so much you can go up when you're the second string tight end. Even though we use tight ends a lot, it's not going to be a monstrous impact, but it could be noticeable. Robbie Robbie Oots should be better as well, just because I mean Oots was not that good last year, but the improvement that he makes will be noticeable but not huge. I'm more looking at the offensive line here, and this is where things get really, really spicy. Ray Zabel was a rookie last year. He should be much better in 2026, right? It'd be weird if a player topped out as a rookie, especially on the offensive line. That's a position where traditionally you get better as time goes by, as you get more experience. Jalen Sundle, maybe, I don't know. Last year was his first full year starting, and he did quite well, but he wasn't great. There were problems, and maybe another year of experience is just going to bring him up even a little bit. And don't sleep on the Anthony Bradford contract year. Remember, Anthony Bradford's playing for his next contract in 2026. So if we make him play for that deal, and right now it looks like we will, I think that he could be a much better player in 2026 just by virtue of the fact that he's going to be locked in like he's never been locked in before. All right, so then you get to your defense, right? You get to your defense, and right away there's some pretty clear names here. You've got Byron Murphy, and don't forget about this one, guys. Byron Murphy turned 23 when the season started last year. 23. You don't typically expect a football player to peak when they're 23 years old. You would expect them to continue to get better until they get to about 24, 25, just by virtue of the fact that they're really filling in. Like, you don't get those final muscles on you. I remember talking about this with Charles Cross a couple years ago. There is another level that you go up when you hit that 24, 25 years of age area, just by virtue of the fact that you're getting those final grown man muscles. And Byron Murphy was very good last year at 23 years old. He was 23 last season, and he had 7 sacks despite playing a decent chunk of his snaps from the nose tackle alignment. He had 62 tackles overall. He was one of the best down linemen in the league. He was very destructive, and he was arguably playing out of position, by the way. I know everyone has a different opinion about that, but I would certainly argue that Byron Murphy was playing out of position. So when you talk about all that, you've got a real chance for him to get better. The counter argument would be, how much better can he get? I think that you could make the argument that he had 7 sacks last year, and how many pressures did he have? 21, mostly playing nose tackle. He can't get that much better, and maybe that's true. But don't count out Byron Murphy being a part of the improvement this team makes in some areas to offset the drop-off. And if you're talking about defensive linemen, you also have to talk about the other young guy, Riley Mills. Let's get into that. So this one's kind of a no-brainer, right? Riley Mills, first of all, he's going to be 25 before the season starts, so age is not really going to be a thing, right? He's not like 22 years old and he's still growing into his body. He's 25. He is what he is at this point, more or less, and he barely played last year. I know people forget about this a little bit now because of the Super Bowl sack he had, but he didn't even play 30 snaps in 2025 on defense. And then in the postseason, he got to play a little bit, and he made that great play in the Super Bowl on Drake May. Anything you get out of Riley Mills next year is more than what you got out of him last year. So there is some anticipation of an offset here because of Mills. And I do say the word offset because I know that the counter argument people would make is, well, Big Cat's going to be worse. Jaron Reed's going to be worse. And both those statements could be true. I definitely think that's a possibility. I would be very surprised if Jaron Reed didn't slip a little bit just because of age. But then you've got guys like Murphy and Mills to kind of step up to offset that without you really losing that much. And then you get to the edge rusher room, and there are concerns here. I think you're betting a lot of chips right now on Derek Hall, right? Because the other guys on the team, you don't know what they're going to be. You don't know how much they're going to fall off. Age is starting to become a bit of a concern. Derek Hall just turned 25. So I look at Derek Hall. I look at the fact that he was kind of a non-factor as a rookie, at least as a pass rusher. The fact that he had 8 sacks in 2024, and then he slipped significantly in pass rush production in 2025. And then he had that really nice Super Bowl. I feel like he can be better than he was in 2025, where he had 2 sacks, played 14 games, 21 pressures. It's not terrible, and I think there are some reasons why Hall doesn't get a ton of pass rush production. But at the same time, I feel like he can do more. I don't feel like 2025 is the end-all be-all of Derek Hall. And I know that it was a trade-off, right? He didn't do as much as a pass rusher, but he did even out a little bit as a run defender, and that was more important to the team, that he would even out a little bit as a run defender. So I know that it's not as simple as just saying, oh, he'll just be better and because he'll have more pass rushing stats. But I do feel like there's another level there. I don't know if it'll be huge, but I think it'll be something. And then you've got a couple of guys here that I think could go one way or the other. I could see arguments both ways for these two guys. Do they have any more room to grow? Can they get better in 2026? First guy is going to be Drake Thomas. and the next guy is going to be Okada. So let's talk about this a little bit here. Let's try to understand this, because I think that there's a couple of different arguments to be made here. So Drake Thomas, look, last year was his first year starting in the NFL. I know he was 25, but he basically did not play those first few seasons. If you go down to his snap counts, he played a total of 41 defensive snaps in 2023 and 2024. He was a special teamer. So 2025 was the first time he actually got to play significantly on defense. But he played well. That's the thing. He played well. I'm not going to say it was perfect, but he played good football, and he was a good part of this defense. The thing is, he is an undrafted player. He was not drafted out of college. So I don't want to sit here and act like I think there's some extra well of ability that he has that can elevate him to a Pro Bowler. I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if it's fair to expect that. Drake Thomas was a UDFA player that we picked up for very cheap, and then he ended up becoming somebody that was a quality part of a elite defense. I don't want to sit here and say we need him to elevate to Pro Bowl status, or that we should expect it. It may not be reasonable. Like, he was good last year. Maybe that's just what he is. And same for Okada. Okada, also undrafted, also kind of in that similar age range. He's about to turn 27. 2025 was the first year he got to play meaningfully on defense. The year before that, he had 33 defensive snaps. The year before, he had 0. So last year was his first chance to play defensively. He played most of the season, and he was good. He was good. Maybe not elite, but on the one hand, maybe you would expect him to elevate himself to elite, because he should improve over last year, because last year was his first full year starting. On the other hand, when you're talking about a guy like Okada that was not some elite talent, somebody who was a UDFA out of Montana State, maybe this is just his ceiling, and we should be cool with that. So I could see it both ways here. I think you could make a pretty good case in both directions, and I'm not going to be upset if they don't get better. In fact, you could make an argument that the more rational expectation is that they get a little bit worse, because the new car smell comes off a little bit, and you have that sophomore slump, and maybe their lack of relative talent catches up to them a little bit. I think some people would argue it goes that way, where the two players are actually not that good. And last year was a little bit of a mirage. That could happen too, and I won't be shocked. So it goes a few different ways. But I could see that there. I don't think Witherspoon is going to get too much better. Josh Jobe, not really. I mean, I think he is what he is. Julian Love didn't play very much last year. He only played like half the season, so that's kind of an interesting argument. He should play more, so we should get more out of him. But I don't think he'll improve as a player, really, so it depends on your perspective. But the really fun one here, and this is the one that could really just elevate things, Nick Emmanwori. Now you're talking. Emmanwori just turned 22 right around the time of the Super Bowl, and many people, myself included, did not think Nick Emmanwori was going to be a big-time contributor as a rookie because of how raw he looked in college. And he went out there very quickly, and I know he got hurt early on, and then he had to integrate himself back into the lineup, but he became a part-time slot corner, part-time linebacker, part-time edge rusher. He was so many different things for this defense, and he did it at such a high, unique level. I know that there are problems there. I know that he had some issues in coverage, some little things here and there, but the level of impact he had for the Seahawks in 2025 was massive, and he was 21 years old, right? And he didn't even have the full season because of the injury, right? 11 passes defensed is incredible for a rookie player who doesn't even play the full season. 2.5 sacks, 81 tackles, 9 for loss. Like, he was about as destructive as you could ever expect any rookie to be, much less this rookie who did not look like a finished product coming out of college at all. So Nick Emmanwori, I mean, you would expect him to get better, right? The only pushback you could have there is, well, how much better can he be? I know he's not perfect. I know that he's not an all-pro level player yet. But at the same time, when you look at all he did last year and how few his holes were, relatively speaking, like, he had a little bit of trouble in coverage, but not really even that bad there. how much better is he going to be? At a certain point, you're talking about the best defensive back in football. But at the same time, he should get better, right? Like, he was 21 last year. How crazy would it be if Nick Emmanwori goes out there at 21 years old and immediately becomes the player that he's going to be the rest of his career? So, yeah, it feels like Emmanwori is going to elevate himself to some Derwin James in his prime type level in 2026. And that's big. That's massive. This isn't a 24-year-old last year, and we're talking about, oh, he'll make a little bit of a step up when he hits 25. No, I think the expectation, and it's a reasonable expectation, is this guy should become a player that is at the Pro Bowl or even All-Pro level. And that's offsetting the Reek Woolen loss all day in my mind. So, yeah, I just wanted to go over this a little bit, just talk about the things that should improve, because one conversation that maybe we'll have in a future video, because I may as well, there are going to be guys on this team that slip, right? And most people know who they are. Big Cat, Reed, D-Law, maybe Nwosu, Fowler to an extent, although he's new. Cooper Kupp. But what about these guys? All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.